The 3D curve command is similar to a 2D sketch, except you're working in 3D space as opposed to 2D space. So instead of sketching on a two-dimensional plane where you have two directions you can go in, a 3D curve can go in all directions. For example here, if I select on the 3D curve command and then just start drawing a spline, I'm going to click here and then click here, and then I'm going to click the middle mouse button to rotate in my 3D scene here, and I'm going to continue to click in various spots and rotate around and click a few more times. Now I'm going to hit the escape key to finish off that 3D curve, then click OK. As you can see, this curve is in 3D space, so it's not on a 2D plane like it would be if we were looking straight down at it like that, for example. It's actually in 3D space. Now there are many different uses for this, and I'll go through a few here, and then I'll go into more detail on the 3D curve command after I show you the examples. One example here we have is an excavator where we need to run a hose going up through the top here, and you can see this hose is curving in this direction here. It's going around like that, but it's also curving here. You can see it's going across to the left, so it's curving in two different directions. Now that we've got that 3D curve created, I'll zoom in and create a sweep using the 3D curve. So I'll click on the sweep command. I'm going to create a new part, and for the section on the sweep command I'm going to use this section here, and for the guide curve I'm going to use the 3D curve there. Now I'll hit OK, and as you can see, that 3D curve has turned into a hose there. And we could apply a nice color to this to make it look a little bit better here. And now we have a 3D shape that's following that 3D curve path. And we could of course shell this out with the shell command to hollow it out if we wanted to. Another example here is using 3D curves to create a complex curvaceous surface, like the hull of this yacht here. So here I have three 3D curves. Note we could of course use more than this if we'd like to refine the geometry. Now I'm going to go to the surface tab here and click on loft surface. I'm going to create a lofted surface between these 3D curves. Then I'll hit OK. As you can see, we've now created that shape. And if we apply a reflective material, it might be a little bit easier to see what's going on in this shape. Maybe not that reflective, a little bit less. Another example is this factory where we have two tanks. Now, let's say we want to connect these two tanks with a pipe. Of course, we could go ahead and add every individual piping section, which would probably still be pretty quick, but with the 3D curve command we can actually run a pipe along a 3D curve. This uses the IronCAD Mechanical add-on to run the pipe along the 3D curve. So I'm going to go ahead and select onto the IronCAD Mechanical add-on in the pipes area here, and you can see we've got this place on wire option for pipes. So with that we'll select the 3D curve, then drag and drop the place on wire option onto there. As you can see here, we have a preview of our first section of pipe, which we can customize. So for example, I'll change this diameter maybe to 50, hit the blue button to update that, and I'm going to hit OK, but I'm going to zoom out before I hit OK so you can see what goes on. So now I'll hit OK here, and as you can see, it's going to go ahead and build that pipe for us, following the 3D curve. And it has added in parts and straight parts, and then curve sections as well. And here we have mostly straight sections, but over here we have an angled section, which is coming up like this. So it has automatically created a different type of curve that's extended further than 90 degrees. Another example here is something like this. We're going to put structural steel on this. So this is a really simple caravan model where we have a very basic kind of block caravan, which is just a simple block stretch there, and then it has a few chamfers on it and a hexagon here. Now I'm going to go ahead and project the 3D curves from this face. So I've got that face selected. I'm going to right click and select Create, Extract 3D Curve. And now if we hide the block, we now have a 3D curve from that face. Now I'm going to go to the IronCAD Mechanical Mech folder here and use the steels. So I'm going to select onto the 3D curve, then drag and drop a steel section out, and then choose a size for this. So 50 by 50 is probably pretty good, and we can also offset it if we'd like to. So for example, I could create this as an offset to the side there of our line to keep it inside the 3D curve lines. And of course we could use the tribal to snap it precisely in position if we'd like to. So for example, I could snap this directly to there, and then I could go ahead and do the same and do it directly up, so the corner now is aligned. And once we're ready, I'll move this into a place where we can see it first. Once we're ready, we'll then just hit OK, and as you can see, the command will go ahead and add in steel sections all the way around that 3D curve, and then go in and automatically trim them for us to cut the angle onto each section to join them together. And there we go. Then of course, if we wanted to, we could go ahead and assemble this and then create a linked copy over here, and then we could go ahead and start adding in more sections to this. For example, I'll drag and drop one out onto here, and then use the magic wand to automatically calculate that distance. And then now that we have that section there, we could go ahead and start copying more of those around. So we could go ahead and put one here, put another one here, here, and here. And we could of course move those around more with the tribal, but that's just a really simple example there. So there are a few different use cases for the 3D curve command there. Now I'm going to go ahead and start from scratch and show you how we do each of those use cases. So let's start with the excavator model here. And we'll actually make the 3D curve, which is going to follow this path. So let's go ahead and delete the existing 3D curve and delete the existing part we have there. And delete the profile that I used as well. So now we have just these parts, which is kind of the track, and you don't actually need these if you don't want to have these, but they make it easier to place the 3D curve. So now I'm going to select onto the 3D curve command. Note there are various different options here that we have. Now they're similar to the options you get when creating a 2D sketch. We have a spline option, we have insert line, which is a singular line, and we have insert a polyline, which is a continuous line, which will create a new straight section each time, but it's a straight line as opposed to a spline. Then we have the arc option, and we have a circle option, and we have some more advanced options here like creating a fillet and adding reference points, and then showing reference points in 3D. And we have insert point by tribal, which we'll go into in how to do that in a case like this while we're working as well. And then there's the helix option. There's interpolate on surface, which I'll go into later on. And there's insert a connector to connect two 3D curves together. And there's the split curve option and the create smoothly connected curves option. So I'll go into all those options throughout the video, but I'm going to start with a simple spline here. And I'm going to zoom in and choose where I'd like to start this off. So when you are looking at something like this, you'll get a snap point for the center point there that you can get if you are kind of hovering over it and you have geometry behind it, and you'll get that center point. If you don't have geometry behind it like this, then you won't get that center point. It's worth noting we can actually move the position of the first point of the 3D curve using the tribal, but it is easier if you get it in the spot you want straight away. So I'm going to click there, which creates it in the spot I want it to be. And then I'm going to click this point as well. So I've created those first 2 points, but now it's going to be kind of hard to go up here and create this, but it's worth noting we could just place it and click the same points on these, but that'll actually create a problem. We actually want to use the tribal, but I'll show you really quickly the problem it will create if we just do it this way. So I'm just going to click individual points, just a single point there, and then go ahead and press this single point, something like that, and then let's select this one up here. And then whenever you're ready with the 3D curve, you just hit the escape key to finish it off. And as you can see, it's not really aligning the way we would want it to there. It's a bit kind of off to the side. Now we fix that by adding in more points to the 3D curve. So I'm going to delete that 3D curve and we'll start again here, and I'll show you what I mean by using the tri-ball. So we'll place this first point of this 3D curve here again, and we can even place the second one. But now I'm going to actually press the Q key or the F10 key to activate the tri-ball. And then now I can actually move this into position. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and snap into position there. So if you hold down the Shift key whilst hovering over circumference, it'll snap to the center. You can also right click and just select a center point and then click the circumference as well. Now we can actually move that precisely. So we can type in precise dimensions here. For example, I could type in 50 millimeters and hit enter. And now we just press the P key on your keyboard, so the P key for point, and it'll place a point. I'm going to press the P key once on my keyboard now, and I'm going to keep dragging the tri-ball. And as you can see in the background there, a point has been placed. I'm going to press the P key again. So now we've created 2 points there, which kind of keeps this starting section relatively straight. So it keeps it relatively aligned. And then we're going to go up and do the same up here. So I'm going to zoom in, and we could do it on both sides of this, for example, out the front of this and out the back, but I'm just going to do it out the back because it'll make things faster. So we're going to snap to these 2 points again. But now I'm going to activate the tri-ball and move to this center point. And now I actually want to align the tri-ball, so I'm going to hit the space bar and just align to that face. It's the same as right-clicking and selecting perpendicular to face and then clicking on that face. I just did it by dragging it, which is a little bit faster. Now I'm going to drag this and press the P key another few times. Doesn't really matter what distance we use here. And so you can precisely measure it and type it in an exact dimension if you want, or you can just do it randomly like I have here. Now I'm going to deactivate the tri-ball. You can see those points have been placed there. And then I'm going to zoom out and click on my next point here. And the dimension's just in the way a little bit there. If we just click into that, it should go away in a second when we rotate. And I'll click on this next point here. And again, activate the tri-ball, move it into position, and then align it where we want it to be aligned. So I'm going to drag that to there after hitting the space bar. And now again, I'm just going to drag it, P key on my keyboard a few times, and then deactivate the tri-ball with the Q key or F10 key, and then drive across to the next piece here. So again, snapping to that center point, and then this center point here. There we go. And now I'm just going to hit the escape key. Whenever you're ready, hit the escape key and it'll finish off that 3D curve at whatever point it really got to there. If we wanted to, we could continue to place a few more straight sections at the end here just in case, but I'm going to leave it as it is. So now you can see the result of that is a much better 3D curve for kind of what we're looking for here, which is that it's much closer, much more closely aligned to the back section here. It's no longer kind of off to the side. It's worth noting though, there is still a little bit of a rise here that we may want to get rid of. So if we wanted to get rid of that, we could continue these straight points for longer, up into here, for example, just to iron out that if we really wanted to. But in this case, if it is a flexible hose, it probably doesn't matter too much. So now that we've got that done, I'm going to hit OK to finish it off. And now we have that 3D curve there. Now we just need to create a 2D profile to sweep along it. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and go to the Sketch tab and click on a sketch on a 2D shape. Now I'm going to zoom in here and select onto the 3D curve, but I want to change this to use normal to curve at point. So then we're going to select the curve, which is this one, and the endpoint. So it's going to be normal to, or basically directly facing up against, directly kind of opposite, not opposite, but basically facing the direction of that curve where we want it to be. And you can see it's at that endpoint there. So I'm going to now hit OK. Now basically I'm just going to draw a simple circle here. And in this case, I may actually just project a circle from this, but let's say I draw one just for fun. And so I'm going to zoom in here and go to the center point and just draw a circle. Now I could go all the way out to there, which you can see is a 10 mil hole if I snap to it like that. But I'm going to maybe make it a little bit smaller. Let's go 9.8 or something like that. So I'm going to type 9.8, hit enter. Whoops, made that way too small there. I did 0.8. Let's make that 9.8. Hit enter, there we go. So you can see it's got a little bit of tolerance there. And now I'm going to hit OK. So now we have a 2D cross section. And if we hide this, it'll make it a little bit easier to see what's going on. Now we've got a 2D cross section there. And then we have the 3D curve. So now we're going to go ahead and click on the sweep command. In this case, we want to create a new standalone part. But if we already had some other hose somewhere, it's possible if we had another hose coming out here, we may want to join it onto that part and continue on. But in this case, we're going to create a new part from scratch. So we're going to do create new standalone part. The section is going to be this. So for the section area, click on this 2D profile. And for the guide curve, click on the 3D curve. Now, our part here is yellow, so it's a bit hard to see the preview, which is also yellow. But if we scroll to the side there with the middle mouse button, you can see that preview. I'll then hit OK, and that will create our 3D curve. No, we've still got a separate 3D curve here in the 3D scene. So we've got a separate 3D curve and 2D profile. So, for example, now we can just delete those if we want. And actually inside the part, we have a sweep feature, which has both the guide curve and the cross section stored in it. So we can go in here and edit this 3D curve later on if we'd like to. So, for example, here we could select onto some points or areas and change the geometry around. I won't go into much detail. I'll do it here. You can see I stuffed that up a bit. It's going all over the place there. But basically, we can refine the curve if we'd like to later on. In this case, though, I haven't done that very well, and I'll just hit the exit button, and we'll go back in and have a look at it, and I'll focus on doing it in a little bit more detail. Because we have a few different points here, a few different points at each level. It might be kind of hard to align this the way we would want it to be. As you can probably see there. So it's easier to see the alignment and how that all works when we're just working with one or 2 points. So I'll explain that a little bit further on, or just with a simple 3D curve. So, and that's actually, it's something worth explaining actually. So I'll explain it here now. So with this 3D curve, which is a little bit simpler, and it doesn't have lots of heaps of points at the start, which can, with a spline type thing, can make them difficult to change the start of it if you have lots of points together. So if we go ahead and edit this, you can see we can actually click and we can adjust the curvature. So we can stretch these arrows to adjust that curvature. And you can, as well as stretch them like this, you can actually also go in, right click, and align them in different directions. So you don't actually have anything to align it to here, because you haven't got any other geometry really. But if we go ahead here and drag and drop out a block, for example, so now we've got this block over here, and I'm just going to move it to the side. So now that we've got that, we could actually align this. So if I go ahead and edit this, and this is obviously the case when you're actually modeling, you may have geometry in your scene already that you can refer to. And so by doing that, what we can actually do is align this arrow to certain things. We could say, okay, make this parallel to this edge. And then it's going to be parallel to that edge, the direction it's starting in. And we can continue to stretch that to increase that the smoothness of that connection. And it's not positioned on that edge, of course, it's worth noting. If we wanted to position it on that edge, we could just drag it across. But we were mainly aligning to that edge in this case. Okay, so that's the spline command there that I was showing in the excavator model. It's worth noting that there are lots of things you can do here to customize a spline. So you can, for example, any of these points you have that when you created the spline, you can actually click on, activate the tri-ball, and then move them around. It can sometimes be hard to activate the tri-ball on them if you have the coordinates here, or if you are in the coordinates field here. Then when you press Q, sometimes it'll just type Q over here, which is obviously not what you want. So it can be a good thing to do is to click into empty space and then just click on that point again and activate the tri-ball. And as long as it doesn't think you're trying to type, then it'll activate the actual tri-ball on the point, which is what you want. But sometimes, yeah, if you're doing that, you get the Q coming up. So if we click in there, and then I'm clicking on this, and it's doing Q in there, and the tri-ball's not coming up, then you just click into empty space, click on the point, and then you've now got the tri-ball to control that. You can see each one of these points has its own arrow here, so you can change, you can stretch it to change how smooth that is, and you can also align it. So each point can have its own alignment depending on what you're trying to do. So, I mean, a good example, if we go back to the excavator model, is we could actually, instead of doing the heaps of the points here, we could actually just increase that alignment handle. So we could actually just create a 3D curve that has a different type of alignment. Instead of having all the points, it always depends on the case, basically. But instead of having all these points, we could just create this to have singular points, but then with stretched alignment handles. So, for example, we could just start this 3D curve off again. I'm just going to zoom in here. It's a little bit hard to get this point, and create that 3D curve there. And it's actually going to be hard to get these center points here with the current setup of this. So I'm just going to place it in a random spot, and then we'll come back to it, because you can always move it later with the tri-ball, so it doesn't matter too much. And then we'll drive up to here and place this one on the back. So what I'm referring to with those handles is that we could actually, instead of doing it the way we did there, we could actually come in here and then align this. So I'm going to make it perpendicular to face and select this face, and now that's going to be aligned there. And now you might be wondering or worried that, okay, this is still going to be going up to the side here, which is not what we want, and that's where we can just stretch this handle to straighten that out further. And then with this one we do the same. So with this, click on the spline, we can see this arrow here, we can go perpendicular to face, and we can align that one perpendicular to that face, and then stretch this one across as well. So the further we stretch that across, you can see it's going to create a nicer join there. Oops, I didn't mean to select that point. And we do want to now, I've moved that around, just realign this one to be perpendicular to that face. So now that we have those two, you can see this is just another way of kind of achieving the same goal, but it is a little bit harder to control than just doing the points like I did before. So it's up to you which method you want to use, of course, depending on what you're doing. They can both be useful, but as you can see, generally just placing multiple points can be a little bit faster and easier than trying to align all of these in the exact way you want them to be aligned. It can sometimes just be a little bit easier to place those extra points like I did earlier on. But this is an option as well. So we just make this one as well perpendicular to face, and it's a little bit hard to see this face from an angle because we have a lot of geometry. We could hide that, of course. And now that's a little bit better with all of that aligned. So you can see this one's still not too crash hot up here, which we could probably try and fix. Oops, I'm dragging that point around now. But yeah, as you can see, you can use those arrows to align the 3D curve as well. But in this sort of case with the hose, generally I'd prefer to do it with the point option with the triball. It's a little bit simpler, and it's a little bit faster and easier to do. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the other options we have in here. So let me just have a quick read through them, what we'll move on to next. I mean, we should go in and have a look at the Storm Cruiser model here, where we have the surface. So these 3D curves were just created on here, and we can project 3D curves. So we can take 3D geometry and select an edge, for example, and then we can extract 3D curve from that edge. But of course, if you're drawing it from scratch, then that doesn't help that much. So if you're drawing something from scratch, you can of course just draw the 3D curve with the triball. So let's go ahead into the surface tab here, and let's create a new 3D curve. And to start, I'm going to create it on a 2D plane. It's worth noting that if you are in a certain view, for example the side view here, and you start drawing a 3D curve, if you don't snap to anything, it'll actually automatically leave it in only one plane for you, which is convenient to know. So if we turn off perspective there, and we then create a 3D curve, and we just select a few points here, something like that, and I'll hit the escape key. Again, of course, we can adjust this curve if we'd like to change it around, and then I'll hit OK. And you can see here that's created it on a 2D plane, even though it is a 3D curve. But that's a good way to draw them so that you can know where the positioning of each thing is. And then we can of course edit this at any time. So we could now go in later on and say, okay, well let's now stretch this in this direction and customize that curve quite a lot. And we can just draw more of those curves as we go and create this sort of shape here with a surface lofter. There's many other surface tools you can use that would create 3D geometry from 3D curves. There's also another option here, which is this option, which is the interpolate on surface option. And what that means is that the 3D curve that's created, if I just X out of here and go ahead and create one on the side of this yacht, the 3D curve that's created will only stay on top of the surface. And this is something pretty important to note for some sort of shape like this, which is very curvaceous. So I'll go down onto the bottom here. Now if we were to draw a normal 3D curve, and we place one point there and one point there, and maybe we'll go back up here again and place another point. Now if I hit the escape key with that finished, and then hit OK, you can see what's happening here is that the 3D curve is actually behind. We've got the start of it up there, and then most of it is behind the other geometry. It's not sticking on top of the surface. If we did lots of points, it would stick relatively on top of the surface. The more points we add, the more references it has to stay on top of the surface. Like that. But you can see it's still going in and out from on top of the surface. So over here it's gone under the surface again, and here it's above the surface, and so on. The interpolate on surface option actually sticks it to the surface, so it actually keeps it stuck there. It's worth noting you can, if we're doing this, you can't go onto another surface next to the one you're working on. So that's just worth noting. It's a limitation there. You can't go across onto that. But you can see here, if we just create a few simple points like we did last time, and then hit the escape key to finish off, you can see that should definitely go under if we were doing it the same way we did last time. But because we use the interpolate on surface option, that's now staying perfectly on top of that surface for us, which can be certainly useful for drawing on top of surfaces like this. Okay, we have some simple options here, like drawing an arc or a circle, which I'll show really quickly. So they're quite simple in that if we wanted to draw an arc, we just select the first point, and then we select the second point. And actually, let me do it in an empty file so it makes it a little bit cleaner and more obvious what I'm doing. So I'm going to create a 3D curve and do an arc, and we're going to select the first point, select the second point, and then we just choose the third point to define that arc. Now I chose all of those points on one plane, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. We could choose 1 point here, 1 point here, and then 1 point over here. And it's going to use those 3 points to create an arc there. We then have the circle option, and that works in a very similar way. We choose 1 point, 2 points, and then a third point to define the circle. Again, they could be on different 3D or in different positions in 3D space. So the 1 point up there, we'll place another point over here. And you can see a preview of this circle as I move it around. And just choose wherever we'd like to place that point. Especially useful if you have specific points you want to snap an arc or a circle to. Now let's go ahead and delete those lines we just drew there. We can also create a singular line, which just creates a straight line like that, which is pretty simple. But of course the straight line is a 3D line, so it can go in multiple directions. You can go one going that way, you can connect it from that, and then go down this way. And then a polyline will do the same sort of thing, except you just continue. So you place 1 point, next point, next point, next point, next point, and so on. And it's very useful with the polyline option to use the tribal, because you can again use the P key to place points. So place a point here and drive off over here, place another point, and you can see we're now creating a 3D curve between multiple stops there, which is based on all straight lines or straight sections, which is great for doing steel or piping, for example. So this is how we create the factory layout piping option. So I'm going to go ahead and go into there and show you how that works. Let's exit this one. So with this option, we start the 3D curve here and we want to go over to there. So I'm going to delete this pipe we've got and the 3D curve we've got. And this time we'll create a 3D curve again. And I'm going to start it on this center point. Again, that's just a useful snap point. But once you finish 3D curve, you can click on that point again and move it with the tribal if you want. Now I'm going to activate the tribal straight away for this next point. I'm going to hold down the shift key, snap to that center point again. I'm going to drive up here a little bit. And because, I'm in a spline here, which is not what I want, not what I want to show. So I'm going to hit the escape key so I don't create that. Or if you had a few more points, you may want to delete what you created. But here I'm going to now click on the insert polyline. That's what I want to show. This is a straight piping thing I want to do, so I don't want to use the curvaceous spline option. So again, I'll press that point, activate the tribal, and because we're not using the spline option, we only really want 1 point here. We don't really want the heaps of points along the path, because these are just straight lines. So I'm going to go up a certain distance here. I can type in a precise distance. In this case, let's make it exactly 250. Now I'll press the P key on my keyboard to place a point. And now I'm going to go across, for example, and this can be any size we like, but I'm going to go to that edge and then come back from that edge by, say, 150. Press the P key again on my keyboard, and then we're going to go straight across from that, all the way across here. And I'm going to go from here, so we're locked on that axis. I'm going to align to the center point of this, hold down the shift key to get that center point snap. Press the P key again there, then I'm going to lock down this axis and go across to the center point, press the P key again there, and then drive that down, and I'll just go further down than the top in this case and just press the P key again. Now I'll hit the escape key to finish that off. Now you can see we have that piping section. Or the 3D curve for the piping section, I should add. And so I'll hit OK. And now we have that 3D curve ready to go, made from straight lines this time instead of the curvaceous type spline. And now we can again go in and use the place on wire option. So select the 3D curve, drag and drop out the place on wire option, and make sure you select the 3D curve before you drag out the place on wire instead of just dragging the place on wire out. So select the curve you want to place it on, then drag it out. Then we choose what we'd like to add, and in this case let's up the size just for fun. We'll go up to 80, or maybe we'll go up not that high, maybe 65. The blue button to update that. And we can also change the thickness. Let's make that 3. And then we'll hit OK. And again, that's going to go ahead and create those parts for us. So we have that piping section. Now in this case I did a pretty simple pipe that mainly went straight, but it doesn't have to be straight and only 90-degree angles. So let's create another section here quickly where we go from here. So I'm just going to start from here and activate the tri-ball now, and I'm just going to go in kind of a random distance from this, a random direction and distance from this. So because I selected in a random point, it's quite hard to snap to that. And in this case, I'm just going to pretend we're doing something kind of really strange in the direction this is going. But if we wanted to, I mean, and actually a better way to do this would probably be to place a point and then move it afterwards. So place a point at least somewhere we know we have a reference. So even the start of that is a good reference, because at least then we have some sort of reference we can use. So I'm going to use that as my start reference. Activate the tri-ball. At least then now I can snap back to it, which just makes things a little bit easier for the positioning. But you can see now if I start placing points here and then I go up and I start going diagonal and things like that, that's perfectly fine as well. It'll still create the piping sections for us. Place a point there, place a point there, go up here, and we'll place a point there, and then we'll go straight down to the floor here, place another point there. Then we're going to deactivate the tri-ball, hit the escape key, and now I'm going to go onto this one, activate the tri-ball, and now make sure this goes into the tank here, and I'll raise it up a little bit. And we could of course select onto this one, raise it up by the same dimension we raised that one up, but I'm just going to leave it as it is for now. So you can see with this sort of option, it's now a little bit, the angle is a little bit more complex than the angles we had on this one, which were mainly just 90 degrees. So now we can drag and drop the pipe out again to place on the wire, and might go something a little bit smaller this time, like 40, hit OK, and it will now generate those sections for us. Now let's go in and just investigate some of the other 3D curve options and what they mean. So let's create a 3D curve here. Now we've gone through all of these options. We haven't gone through the fillet option yet. So if we have a 3D curve, especially a line, so if we have, for example, a polyline here, and a line like that. Let's create the third one just for fun. So we have 3 lines there. If we click on the fillet command, we can click on that point, and then you can see we're getting a preview, and we drag the mouse like that. We can just create a fillet like that. We can also click on one line and then the next line to create a fillet, just like that. Now you might be wondering how you edit these fillets. So you can click on this, if we deselect the fillet tool, we can click on this fillet and click on this. Oh, not that point actually. Click on this point and the inside the center point, I think, of the fillet. We can click on that and we can drag this approximately. But if you'd like to, you can also right-click on the fillet and select Edit Radius, and then you can type in a specific radius. So we can say, okay, that should be 10. Same here. We can click on this, right-click, select Edit Radius, and change this to be exactly 20. That's the fillet option there. And then have the reference point option. So this will actually just create a point in space. You can move that point with the tri-ball. You can move it with anything you like. But basically, it's creating a 3D point reference in space that you can then use later on. So we have this option checked here, which is going to show them in the 3D scene, and when we finish the command. So you can see if I now select on a spline, I can actually use these as snap points. So for example, I may want to go in earlier and add all these points with the tri-ball just to get my kind of points where I want to snap the 3D curve to, and I could go in afterwards and go, okay, I want to snap between all those points I just made with my 3D curve. Just like that. And then if we hit OK here, you can see those points are now showing. They're a little bit darker, kind of a point there. And if we create those points by themselves, so if we delete this curve here, and we have that option checked, that show reference points option checked, they'll show themselves in the 3D scene, which can be useful because you can actually create these points in the 3D curve command, and then you can actually use them for snapping things in 3D. So we can actually now, for example, drag and drop out a cylinder, snap to that one, and then we could go ahead and adjust the direction of this cylinder to point towards this one. So you can use those 3D points for reference with other things if you show them in the 3D scene. So if we now go ahead and edit those again, we can turn that off, and if we turn that off, they'll no longer show when you actually finish the command. So you can no longer use them to snap things like that to it, but you still use them when you're editing the 3D curve. So you can choose which way you'd like to use those. We then have the insert helix option, which will insert a helix, which is good for example, creating threads and things like that. If we've also got the thread command, of course, but just depending on what you're creating, a helix can be useful in many different scenarios. Creating a spring, for example, a helix can be super useful for something like that. So if we now click on just anywhere to start our helix, we'll get the helix command here, and so now we can just jump in here and choose what we'd like to have. So we can go variable pitch, or let's go back to uniform pitch, and we'll go let's just leave it by helix by height and pitch, and we're going to do a uniform radius, and I'm just going to leave it as is. Hit OK. As you can see there, it's created a helix. Now we can sweep something along that. For example, we could sweep a circle along that to basically create a spring there. Okay, then we've also got the interpolate on surface, which I've already shown, and we've got that one again as a reminder. That's for drawing on top of a surface and not going through it, so that the 3D curve stays lying on top of the surface you're drawing on. Then we have this insert connector option. And what this essentially does is it will connect two different 3D curves. So now that I've got this selected, I'm going to select onto this point. You want to select the endpoints, and I'm going to select onto this point. And you can see a preview. It's basically going to try and figure out a way to connect those. We can add connector arcs here, and we've got that checked. We can uncheck that if we want. So I'm going to change this to, say, 20, and hit OK. Oops, got that set as 20. So, I can't set it at 20. It's to input a value between 0 and 19. That's why I can't set it to 20. Let's make it 18, and I'll hit OK. And as you can see there, now it has created a join between those. It's worth noting that it's kind of a smoothly connected join as well between those two pieces there. And there are different options there. If we go ahead and we go and create another one of those somewhere, for example, let's press undo there to get rid of that. And this time let's do the same sort of thing, but let's remove the connector arcs, and we'll hit OK. Now you can see it's just going to use straight lines. So of course, if we were doing something like a hose, the connector arcs might be nice. If we're doing something like a pipe or a steel section, then the getting rid of those arcs might be nice as well. We also have the split curve option, which will create a split in a 3D curve. So if we have a curve that overlaps another curve, then we can do that. So for the purpose of this, let's just create a overlap. So I'm going to draw a spline here, and it's going to hit this spline. It's a little bit hard to hit that spline actually. So let's see if I can position it afterwards with the tribal to hit that spline. If we move that, there we go. So now they're connecting, and because they're overlapping, we can now use the split curve command. So we could say we want to split. We'll pick the first curve. You can see the description down here. Pick the first curve, this one, and then pick the cutter curve. It can be a curve or a surface, as you can see here, or you can press the shift key to pick other split curves. So I'm going to now pick this one, and this is now being split. So if we now go off that command, we can see that curve we just created has now been split in two there. Now if we wanted to do that the other way, so if I activate the tribal on this, snap it to that one again, we could do that the other way around. So we could select this one first. No, the other way around. So the first one you select is the one that is going to be cut. So I'm going to select this one, which is going to be cut, and then I'm going to select this one as the cutting tool. So now, if we turn that off, we can move this out of the way, and now we've split that one there, as you can see. It's now two pieces instead of the one piece. It's not fully disconnected. We could right click and select disconnect if we'd like to disconnect it fully, like that. Another thing you can do is you can display the curvature of a 3D curve if you'd like to see the type of curvature it's using. And so in this case, we just need to finish off a 3D curve. So I'm going to hit the escape key, and I'll just start a new one from scratch that will be a little bit easier to see what I'm referring to with the display curvature. So I'm just going to draw something pretty simple. Something just like that. Now if we hit OK to finish, we can actually right click on the 3D curve. I think it's in the right click option here. We'll soon find out. No, it's not in the right click option there. I'll find it in a moment. Oh, there we go. So it is actually in the 3D curve command. So yeah, you right click and you can click display curvature, and now you can actually see the curvature lines there displayed. So when we adjust the curvature, those lines will adjust. So that can be good for investigating how curves are coming together and joining, and investigating smooth connections and things like that. And you can see if the radius is tighter, then the curvature display will be higher. If the radius is bigger, so is a kind of a larger, there's less of a curve, then the lines here will be lower. So the more curvaceous it is, the higher this section will be when it's displaying the curvature there. And we can, of course, turn that off. And there are a few different curvature options you can choose here if you'd like to as well. I'm going to toggle that off. And lastly, we have this create smoothly connected curves option. And with that option, basically it's going to create, it doesn't do anything by itself, like you don't click on that and then click. It's just saying that whenever you create a new curve, it should be smoothly connected to the last one. So let me turn that off, and I'm going to create a curve at the end point here. Now I'm going to continue on, drive around, hit the escape key. And this one's actually very close to smoothly connected, so let me delete that one. Let's try that again. And this will be a better way to demonstrate it if I make it very not connected, which is what I'm trying to do. So that's a bit better for a non-connected curve. So you can see there, it's not smoothly connecting between the two curves. So if you have this smoothly connected curve option checked or selected on, it means when you go to create this one, it's actually going to automatically create that smoothly connected section there, which can certainly be useful for things like hoses and stuff like that, where you may want to make sure you have that smoothly connected option. It's worth noting though, if you're doing something like a straight line, then you don't really want to have this checked, because you can see here, if we now go to create another straight line with this checked, it's not going to go anywhere. It can only go straight. Because it's only doing smoothly connected, we're only creating a straight line. If we create a spline here, then of course it'll use that straight line, but it can now go anywhere we like after it's smoothly connected to that straight line. Now I'll delete that. It is worth noting as well that you can import coordinate locations to place 3D curves with that as well. So for example, we can go ahead here and start a 3D curve, and I could just do a simple one like this, and then place the first point, and I could go into this coordinate field and say, you need 3 coordinates here, it's worth noting, not just 2 like a 2D sketch. So we could say we want this to be 10, 10, and 10, hit enter, and then here, and then we want to do 10, 100, and 10, hit enter, and then we want to do 20, 200, and 30. So you're just placing a space in between each one. Basically now it's just placing those points around based on those coordinates we input there. And you can also change the final wire color of your 3D curve. Another thing you can do, this is the default fillet radius we've got in here, but another thing you can do is set an offset value. So if we do that, let's set this at 10 mil. And now we create a 3D curve. It's going to create it offset from our selection point. So you can see there it's quite interesting in that it's we're selecting onto this plane, but it's actually offset from that. And we go up to here and it's still offset away from that selection point. So you can do that as well. And that's how to use the 3D curve command.